very much. So my name's Ben. I'm supposed to be a senior, but I took this year off and have spent the past 3 months mostly in the Middle East and North Africa. And I spent some time, the first time I visited a refugee camp, Syrian refugee camp, was in February. And I met this young man, he's 12 years old, and his name is Ali. And I wasn't able to photograph his face because the Syrian war has been quite a difficult civil conflict, and it's not unprecedented that some journalists who have gone in and taken photos and published them of refugees' faces, the regime has gone and tracked down family members within Syria and punished them for their relatives speaking out. So, speaking of speaking out, I think it's best if he tells his story himself. I spoke with him on February 7th.
He was sitting at home, and then the army came in. They took him with them, and then they put him inside a tank, and they were saying that we're going to execute you. And he was begging them, please don't shoot me. And they said, no, we're going to shoot you. It's not up to you. And then the tank was going really fast, and they told him, you have to jump out of the tank or we'll kill you. And he said, no, I'm not going to jump. At the end, they took him to a bus, and they started to hit him. And then they just said, okay, no, you can go. The next day we came here, because apparently on the same day they had caught his older brother and his friends. But his brother got away, but they shot the friends. And even his cousin, they asked him to stop, and once he stopped, they shot him.
So, I felt like I had completely failed him and the other refugees I spoke with when I was unable to get his story and other refugee stories placed in international media. I felt like I'd seen something that I hadn't heard enough about, and one of the reasons he wanted to speak with me, and everybody in the camp wanted to speak, is because they want their stories out. They want the international community to know that the suffering that they're undergoing. And I'm not talking about in the political sense of like regime is good or bad, or rebels are good or bad, but simply civilians are suffering. And one of the reasons that was so difficult to place stories like Ali's is that there are too many refugees. There's 1.3 million, according to the UN, from Syria, scattered around in the surrounding countries. And they all have stories just like that, which is quite alarming when you think about it. But one of the real problems, especially when it comes to aid, not just journalism, is by thinking of refugees as numbers. Simply for getting donations, you have to, aid organizations are saying, if you send us $3, we can buy blankets for a family. You count refugees in 60,000 blankets, or 20 metric tons of food, or 55,000 tents. And that's not getting at the real human need. While it is a basic need simply for survival, refugees are not getting the psychological aid that they need. So while they're getting water, and they have homes, 6 people lived in that tent, they don't have psychological aid. And this is a young girl named Razan. She's also 12 years old. She's also from Dara. I met her in the camp, and she insisted that I leave with this. And while she was about as cheery as anybody I've ever met in my entire life, she ran up to me. She was so excited to see a foreigner. And she said that through the translator, she explained that she loves Beyonce and hates Justin Bieber. And I thought, well, I'm one of you. She also had some very apparent and shocking psychological issues, which really took me by surprise, because her smile didn't change at all when she showed me this picture as well. This is her again. And these drops, she explained with a smile on her face, are not tears, as I'd seen on other refugees' drawings, but blood. And there's a little puddle at the bottom, as you can see. And it didn't affect her. It was like, that's what she was drawing. It was a cheery drawing. You can see her name. It's in Arabic over there, English over here, eyes, blood, lips, and heart. So sometimes in emergency context, the most important things that make us human are overlooked. And there's nothing really for refugees to do in the camp, especially the children. 60% of Zaatari camp, which is now at over 100,000 refugees, I hate to put a number at them, but it's 100,000 at the moment. 60% are children. They have no school because they had one, but in the winter it flooded. Some tents were flooded, and the school, which hosted 4,000 out of the 400 out of the 60,000, was filled with refugees whose tents were destroyed. So they have no school. And you can see the evident boredom in their daily activities. And this is the child-friendly space. I know it looks shocking, but oddly enough, this is actually a very pleasant space when you go inside. It's just an empty tent. Only children are allowed there. The point of it is to give them a space to play and sing songs and draw pictures like Razan did. But it looks quite jarring from here. As I was leaving the camp, there was an explosion. A gas canister blew up in the middle of the camp. And I was amazed that none of the aid workers seemed to really take notice. And it's not that they're heartless, it's that they deal with this every single day. And so I was really sort of stunned. And I don't know what happened because it was getting to be dark. And the camp is quite dangerous in the evenings. There have been recent conflicts. Last Friday there was a battle between refugees and guards. A guard was killed. So aid workers don't go in as the night falls. So I don't know if anyone was injured or killed in that explosion. So I then left. I traveled around a lot in. So after Zaatari, I went north and I skipped over Syria. Syria's Jordan's. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I explained. Zaatari is in Jordan, just south of Syria, and just north of Syria is Turkey. So I flew over Syria and I spent some time traveling around in Eastern Europe for a while, during which time I was sort of vaguely haunted by constantly running into Syrian refugees everywhere. I'd take a bus in Bulgaria and there'd be Syrian refugees on the bus crossing a border into Moldova, something. Always Syrian refugees fleeing from the surrounding area. And eventually, this got to me quite strongly, and I was drawn back to the other side of the border, this time on the Turkish end. Turkey's right north of Syria, and I stayed in a border town for 5 days with no intention of crossing into Syria at all. Just I wanted to learn more from journalists who do, because it's quite a dangerous journey. But after 2 or 3 days there, I felt very much compelled, and after finding out that right south of the border there is a refugee camp of people who have been trying to flee Syria, but unlike those who made it to Zaatari, haven't been so lucky, if you can call those in Zaatari lucky, because they're stuck at the border and they don't have their documents, so they can't get out of Syria. And just south of them you hear airstrikes every single day, and just north of them is the border that is stuck. So I crossed, this is between Turkey and Syria. You walk along this road, and on either side there's this minefield, which is oddly beautiful with the flowers. And then you get to the Syrian gate and you see this. The rebels took over the north of Syria in July, and so they control this crossing now. And in a sense, if you're willing to go, you really just can go. You just walk from Turkey, and the dangers you have to worry about, as I said, is if you go south of the first few kilometers, then you are risking getting bombed, because there are frequent airstrikes in civilian areas. And you also have to worry about kidnappings. There's been a recent surge in kidnappings, usually involving a group called Jabhat al-Nusra, which is, as of last week, has pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda. And so journalists are frequently kidnapped for political reasons or for financial reasons, or more often than not, don't mean to ever put the blame on them because they're trying to do good work, but sometimes some of them try to film Jabhat al-Nusra against explicit orders, and so then Jabhat al-Nusra takes them in and conducts an investigation to find out if they're spies. This was a Syrian border guard. By the way, regarding kidnappings, this was the safest crossing into Syria, so I wasn't too worried about it because this section is controlled by what's generally called the Free Syrian Army. They're a little bit more reasonable in a lot of ways. And this is a very photogenic man I met at the border, in kind of an endearing way. I don't know if you can read this, but it says, "Free Syria, welcome, what does it say? Excuse me. Wish you safety, because they messed up when they printed the sign, they misspelled safety. So I thought that was cute. As soon as you walk in, the refugee camp is right there, and it's striking because they're all trying to get into Turkey. And so I just walked in with a translator. And the next thing that happens is you get surrounded by children. This is also about 50 or 60% children. This one has 14,000 people. And they run up to you and they want their pictures taken, so much so that after a while it becomes very difficult to try to do your job. In a sense, I was trying to get a story that would define the situation of the camp, and instead I was just getting 600 pictures of children chasing me everywhere. Even here, I tried to photograph, this father was cutting his son's hair in the field, but I couldn't get the picture without all of them involved. And when I zoomed in close, I got one with a little bit better framed, but again, there were like children peeking in on every angle. Just as a reminder, you know, children are also born in these camps. So in Zaatari, about 15 or 20 are born every single day. In this one, it's a smaller number, but there are children being born there, and there are people also dying there of old age and all sorts of other things. But most people try to just live their lives as best they can and continue on. They play soccer. Again, like in Zaatari, even though this one's not closed off, they can leave. It's just if you leave, you're going back to your village where you can get hit. So they try to play soccer. This young boy was chopping up an olive tree. I'm not sure what for, but he was doing that. This picture, these were actually two barbers. I didn't even notice this until a few days after I took it and I was out of Syria. But it's two sets of twins, all dressed exactly the same. So I thought that was funny, and I thought I'd throw it in. This barber, everyone's getting haircuts. There were a lot of haircuts going on. Everyone was very well trimmed in the camp, which was also quite striking. But it's not always so cheery. A lot of people are not coping quite as well. The conditions are not very good. One of the main problems, they don't have too much of a problem in either camp with fresh water, but in this one in particular, because they have Turkey is sending in fresh water for drinking, but they can't really dispose of waste too well. And so you end up with these pools of toxic colors, you know, green waste, rivers running through the camp of this, and the smell is something that I couldn't describe. And I almost feel unjustified complaining about it because I'm not actually living in it. This is a few feet from some tents. This too. This is a man who explained to me that he's been trying to get into Turkey for a month, but hasn't been able to. And he has a family of 6, and because, while aid organizations are sort of able to meet the food aid and blanket aid and tent aid in refugee camps outside of Syria, it's very, very difficult for them to actually get into Syria. It's a huge liability. You know, these are organizations that have insurance policies and things. So getting food and tents to the refugees is not so easy. His family of 6 lives on 3 loaves of bread a day, and it's not enough. He took me inside his tent to show me his whole entire family's set of belongings, which is that. A pot, some onions, looks like peanuts, and 2 bags, and a small stove, which, oddly enough, appears to be electric, though there's no electricity running in the camp, so I'm not sure they're able to use it. This was another man who told me his story, and this was the one that I ended up trying to publish, because his story sort of defined this camp in particular. His wife has had a heart problem for the past 2 years, and now it's getting to a point where it's sort of at a crucial stage, and he said to me that his wife has 4 or 5 days to live, and the only place they can get her treated, because it's valve surgery and quite a complicated open heart procedure, is in Turkey. But they're stuck at the border, they've been there for a month, and the Turkish authorities won't let them in. To be fair to the Turkish authorities, I was also told that Turkey does have a policy of, in these kinds of extreme scenarios, letting them in when it's an sort of imminent death and treating them for free. So in theory, she should be fine, but as of this day, and as of the next day when I went back to check on him, she had not been let in. He claimed she was a few days from death. I never saw her. And and she was not allowed into the country. He also had one son fighting with the Free Syrian Army, and the other son fighting with Jabhat al-Nusra, the group that I said is like a little bit more extreme. So oddly enough, you know, they're fighting separately, but go home and sleep in the same town just north of Aleppo. And it's quite an interesting dynamic because one of the things that's being discussed a lot now is how if the rebels end up winning the war, which is a huge if and nobody knows how it's going to pan out, then there's likely to perpetuate the civil war between Jabhat al-Nusra and the Free Syrian Army, which right now are sort of fighting separately but for the same cause. But there's a lot of tensions regarding the future of Syria, and his sons might find themselves on opposite sides soon. So I climbed on top of the gate and I took this photo of the camp, and I don't really know what to say about it. There are 14,000 people that live there. I guess this is important. This is the only freshwater supply tank. So usually people are crowding around it to get water from the tap. There's a young boy who insisted I take his photo in front of the gate. Yeah, I don't know if he had any family, because both days I went, I slept in Turkey. I never slept in Syria, and so I'd sleep in Turkey and then walk across the border in the morning and go back and eat before it got dark. And every single time I was anywhere near the gate, I saw him milling about, usually trying to sell candy or something. I gave him some money and he still kept following. I don't really know his situation. And I noticed this on the final time I was walking across the border, and it was sort of too late to do anything about it and try to find out what was going on, but I thought it was kind of beautiful and strange and spoke to the bizarre nature of this area. This is again the minefield, but you can see here there's a farmhouse and a set of cows and sheep living right on the other side of the fence. And if you can picture this, you've got Turkish gates here, minefield, Syrian gate here, and it's about half a mile, maybe, the walk between. And this farm is on the other side of the minefield here, but it's right between Turkey and Syria. So I don't even know what country this man lives in. It's just a very strange situation. As I said, while I was interviewing the man whose wife was dying, we actually did hear airstrikes a few kilometers away, but took comfort in the expectation that if they got any closer to Turkey, Turkey would shoot them down. And when you do cross the border, I wasn't able to get pictures of it because the Turks are sensitive about this, but they do have huge, huge anti-aircraft missiles lined up on the edge. That's my final photo. So I guess I really just wanted to, I don't really have much of a message, takeaway, like how this can affect your life in Princeton or help anything really. I just felt as though I owed it to the people I spoke with to get their stories across, because when I spoke with them, that's what they expected me to do. And that's about it. So.